one thing you have to keep in mind is anybody who quits any addiction, sort of up to the time they quit, isn't living their values, really. And then all of a sudden they are. So they always make that shift. And the fact that they're at the point before they're doing that just doesn't disprove that values are still critical. So, you know, I always use the same example because it seems so illustrative. I always talk about my Uncle Ozzie because when I went away to graduate school, and then my grandfather died, and I came home, and my Uncle Ozzie was at the funeral, and I go, "Didn't you used to smoke, Ozzie?" And he said, "Oh, for God's sake." He was, I think, 42 at the time. I smoked for 25 years, 4 packs a day, since I was 18. And my Uncle Ozzie fixed TVs and radios. He smoked unfiltered cigarettes, so he'd always have one lit by the table. I mean, you know, it's almost like being on an IV, having the nicotine constantly go in. And I said, I was still just in graduate school, but I don't like to waste my time in small talk, you know? So I said, "Well, why'd you quit?" And he said, "Well, I went out to lunch. They gave a free lunch at a bar, and he wasn't a big drinker, and the price of cigarettes, this was 1962, before the Surgeon General's report, and the price of cigarettes had risen from 30 cents to 35 cents, and I put in 35 cents, and a coworker of mine said, "Look at Ozzie. He's a sucker for the tobacco companies. They could raise the price to $1 and he'd pay that." So when I tell the story, I tell what is true. My Uncle Ozzie was a big labor activist. He worked for GE, but he was always shop steward. He was always standing up for some guy who was being punished. He was always going, you know, tooth and nail with the company. And so, you know, he didn't tell me, he said, when she said that, "Look at Ozzie, he's a sucker for the tobacco company," I said, "You're right, I'm going to quit." And she said, "Well, can I have that pack of cigarettes?" And he said, "What do you mean, and waste 35 cents? And he smoked that pack of cigarettes and he never smoked again, never. So 25 years, 4 packs a day, that's heavy duty. But then he lived through 92. So, you know, you don't smoke for 50 years, you're probably okay. And he said to me, "I never once before that moment thought about quitting." That's what he said. And he had I have 2 cousins. He had a 6-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son, whatever, you know. So, well, why'd my Uncle Ozzie quit smoking? There was a lady he worked with said 8 words to him. Why'd he quit? What happened? And what value was going on there? What value was my Uncle Ozzie? What's that?
More principle than
What's that?
more principle than that he
It
was
was a
not.
principled political statement.
Yeah.
My uncle was highly politicized.
Yeah.
And so that lady sort of got the key to the right value. And, you know, of course you could say, you mean he wasn't political until that lunch? That makes no sense. It was somehow that she was allowed him to make that connection to a value that was kind of really crucial to him. His whole life kind of was organized around that. And somehow she was able to surface it for him by just saying the 8 words, you know, look at Uncle Ozzie's, is it 8, whatever, 12, sucker for the tobacco companies. And that was unbearable to him. And so it was sort of like, well, I'm going to quit smoking or I'm going to die. It was just that important to him. So, you know, you can sort of sit there and think, here's a guy smoking 4 packs of cigarettes a day, smoking in a car with his kids. What a bum. And then the next day, you know, he quit and everybody's going, look at Ozzy, quit smoking, what a man, what control. So you can never, the fact that a human being hasn't expressed their values doesn't mean A, that they don't have those values, that B, they can't be surfaced, and that C, they can't abide by them. So one literature I read about, I don't think you have it, I think I asked Liam, you don't have wet housing here, do you?
Not in Galway, but we would have in different parts of the country.
So, you know, they do interviews with people when they give them wet housing, and people they have values, you know, I mean, they're not in a good place, but they say, you know, I want to live a good life. I want to respect myself. You know, I don't want to mess up everything in my life. People have those values in them. It just takes the kind of certain amount of skill sometimes to navigate around them and get them out. So, you know, a values approach, it always works. It's always worked. It's always worth exploring. And because a person's not prepared to express their values at point A, doesn't mean that that's still not a really powerful tool at point B. And even if you're talking with them about their values and they're still struggling to make them work, it's still worth doing.